Well, Ben, I really appreciate you joining me today. I tell you, it's been an exciting year in North Carolina, and I always appreciate your perspectives and so let's start with an easy one. I guess an easy one. What do you think was the best business news story of 2024 in the state of North Carolina? I mean, we've had a lot of things going, but what do you think? Or maybe that's too much to say the best. What do you think are maybe the top three or four news
We
stories?
covered so much stuff. It's interesting, and in many ways, 2024 was, I think, in many ways, and a lot of people may disagree, but it's almost kind of overcoming a little bit of a hangover because, as you know, in 2023 and 2022, North Carolina was, voted the best state to do business in,
For 2 years going.
and for 2 years running. And so then 2024 comes along and we get into second place. Now we can all discuss if that had something to do with the way that they calculated how the winners were this year compared to last year, which I have a little bit of a bone to pick with. I think that might have a little bit to do with it. But I think what the challenge was for us is to keep on doing what we were doing and succeeding in the mix in changing times. And I think this has a lot to do with the state, but it also has to do with the country as well. Is that since COVID hit, we've really been changing. We've been addressing a lot of different changes and a lot of different challenges to our economy. North Carolina has continued to do a really good job of addressing those things. I think this year this year was a year that we basically kind of had a little bit of a chance to catch our breath as well. You know what I mean? And address some of those things a little more realistically. It wasn't just all great news, great news, great news coming on. I mean, we had some real challenges, and obviously one of the major challenges that we had, not only to business but to the state as a whole, was the effects of Hurricane Helene.
Sure.
And we're seeing that big time right now, in the sense that if you look at the unemployment rate in our state, obviously the folks in the mountains in Buncombe County have really been affected by that. That's not going to go away.
No.
That was had a major impact on hospitality and business in the state. The good news is that to see how some of these communities reacted to that by doing the best that they possibly could to get back on their feet, open their doors up during the fall, was an incredible feat. And I think that's a story of resilience, and that's just a great story about business in North Carolina. So that was a major factor from that standpoint. But I think if you want to look at it as a whole, I think I don't want to say we plateaued a little bit, but we basically, the announcements were still coming, but it wasn't the type of announcements that we were seeing right after COVID hit to that degree and stuff like that. But still, just nice growth to see.
That's right. Well, that's true. Now, in terms of the second place thing, I've been blaming the East German judges on the calculation of the score. It shows you how old I am, right? We're
They were
talking in terms
roiding
of.
up.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I feel like the fix was in, and it's just still a problem. No, I still see great
Right.
things going. Yeah. I still see some great things going for the state. And so, with that said, though, what do you think are going to be the biggest challenges for the new administration, Governor Stein's, administration going forward? We do have a lot of wind in our sail, but at the same time, to your point, I don't think plateau is the right word either. I think it's more of a pause. But what are you seeing those issues to really kind of regain that momentum that we saw prior to the start of COVID, and then also with Hurricane Helene and the after effects of that, which really will be a decade plus of recovery. Things like that don't get fixed overnight.
No, well, especially when you talk about something like I-40, the Tennessee-North Carolina border, that still needs to be fixed, and that's a major artery. You know what I mean? That affects not only people just traveling, but logistical issues. Trucking, all that's goods and services going back and forth across the states. This is interesting, Sandy. We basically had a economic forecast last week that I was lucky enough to moderate, and I was very interested in seeing what the prognosis was, from some of these experts. So we had about 5 or 6 experts in manufacturing, small business, insurance, education, kind of discuss what they thought was going to happen across the state and what some of those challenges were going to be. The good news is that overall it was cautiously optimistic. in terms of where North Carolina was going to be in 2025. And this group was, when we did it last year for 2024, they were looking at a little bit of a dip. So we didn't have that. Which we were very fortunate not to. They're looking at a small percentage of growth and steady growth. The challenges, and this kind of has to do with our state a little bit because of basically two sides of the political spectrum. I mean, a little bit on there, but one was this talk of tariffs has got a lot of business people concerned. Most people are hoping that the talk is a little more getting people to the bargaining table as opposed to actually implementation. But if it's going to be serious implementation, it's going to take a bite out of a lot of businesses here. North Carolina does a lot of exporting. You know what I mean?
Yes, we do.
And so that could be an issue. That could be a factor.
Well,
I
and
think
even
most
Rocky Mountain, we've bet a lot on logistics. I mean, we've got our intermodal. We've sitting on Interstate 95. We're hoping 64 becomes Interstate 87 soon. It's a big deal for all of us, and manufacturing is located here because of those logistics. So anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but that flow. But I just wanted to echo what you're saying is incredibly important, at least for us here locally.
Right. And so that's and let's just be honest. Right now, that's talk. So we'll see what happens as well. Some other things, especially with our state, is we've made quite an investment in alternative energy. We've recruited car companies here. Toyota battery companies, going to be a major employer here. So, that's not baked into the pie. That pie is cooked. You know what I mean? And so essentially, that investment has been made, and we've always been pretty forward thinking in terms of that, and in the sense that we invest now. Current administration is probably still going to, I would think, probably invest in those in those resources as well. However, nationally, that may change a little bit. So we need to kind of figure out how that's going to work, right? But there ain't no going back. I mean, and I'm going to tell you this right now, as the proud parent of a son in grad school, who is majoring in sustainable technologies. Right. We're banking on it here, from that standpoint. So that's going to be a little bit of that's an iffy one. The third challenge I think we're going to be dealing with, quite frankly, is going to be immigration. In the sense that everybody realizes it's a problem, it needs to be dealt with. How it's going to be dealt with is going to be an issue. Because quite frankly, if every illegal immigrant is kicked out of this country, business is going to shut down. That's just the bottom line. And I'm sorry to say, but that's the case. Once again, that may all be talk, and we'll see where that goes. It might just end up being criminals are expelled out of our country. Mission accomplished, no problem, right?
Yeah.
You take it a little bit down the lane, then you're going to have it's going to be a disruptor.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I've been saying that quietly for the last 2 years as all that conversation has occurred. But I mean, we start looking at the restaurant business, all the service, all the entertainment industries, farming, manufacturing. I mean, without immigration, and quite frankly, that's been the tradition and the history of the United States. And none of us are here because things were so great in the old country, wherever that was for us. Or we just simply wouldn't be in the United States. And we're all looking for a better life, and that's just part of the dream, and it's part of who we are as a culture. So I don't think you can. I don't think it's possible to eject every illegal immigrant in the United States into their home. I just don't think we have the bandwidth to do it, quite frankly, even if you engage the military. And I think it's interesting, too, you're talking about green energy or sustainable energy. We've made an announcement here in Rocky Mountain, in Edgecombe County in particular, Natron, going to create something in the neighborhood of 1,200 jobs. It is all about new storage technologies, solid state. And so here's what I'm counting on, is that we are talking about EV really coming in production. That's where the battery technology really has started. And I think we're seeing kind of a pivot off of that because it's still very profitable to produce petroleum-based engines and whatnot. But as a storage of energy, I think batteries just make sense, no matter what you're storing or how you're storing it. And the other thing is, look at a state like North Carolina. It's a swing state. Even in the Trump administration, And this has been a big concern of mine. So I've been making phone calls to everybody I can think of in Trump world and other places just to kind of get a sense of where we are in our announcements. But you know, it represents a lot of jobs, a lot of capital investment, particularly in states that are swing states. And I just have to think that that's going to win today and that it will continue on. I don't think it's, to your point, I don't think maybe it's going to be as in flavor, or certainly not going to be the top, the leading part of the conversation, but I don't think we can do without it. And I think it makes just tons of sense. I really do.
Yeah,
So anyway,
and we know what we're getting. That's the one thing. Last year when everybody's like, "Oh, the uncertainty of the election, we don't know," and as when you don't know, we've had both these guys in for 4 years. Right? So we kind of get an idea of where how he plays the game and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of why there's a little bit of it's cautious optimism. But it's not like full blown. Oh my gosh, this is what's going to happen. One thing I did want to mention in terms of another challenge that we have, and I don't want to think these are all challenges. These are things that happen all the time.
sure.
But we are blessed with increasing population, right, in our state. I mean, we have people coming here all the time, and hearing all the good things about it. That's one of the prizes you pay when you get to be number one in the state for business. People come here, whether they have a job or not. So with this increasing population, we really need to know, where are these people going to live? How is it going to work out? Because another issue that came up, and this is something that I hear all the time, is, affordable housing is really important. And we hear this from a lot of people. Affordable housing is so important, it's so important. Well, what do you all plan to do about it? We don't know yet, but we know it's very important, right? So that's kind of an interesting aspect. And you guys might be poised in terms of where you're at to be able to offer an alternative to that. And even further, if we go, let's go even further into some really rural areas of North Carolina. And this affordable housing, it's affordable without a doubt. How can we get folks into those areas who maybe are not going to want to commute north? They want to come to live a good quality of life, and they want to grow, they want to build a business there. Or you bring in entrepreneurs and those kind of people who want to get away from it all in the Northeast or something to that effect. How do you recruit those people? I think that's a big question. I think a lot of our economic developers in our rural areas are asking. And we spoke about this. We had a rural economic summit a couple months back, and those were some of the questions that were being asked. The great thing about it is that there were a lot of good ideas from those folks there. They weren't like, they were very aware of that situation and were actively had plans to recruit these people, which is really promising.
Oh, it is. And I got to tell you, that's the number one question we ask ourselves virtually every time we sit down and talk about economic development. When a firm comes to town, first they want to know how many employees, where's the catchment area, and how many employees are going to have, and what's the capacity. Well, for the city of Rocky Mount, we have to stretch out about 60 to 75 miles in a radius, and we have a catchment of about 3 million people. Well, and what we've also found, QVC was a story, and when it burned down, we lost a lot of jobs, 900 jobs. The truth is, we only had about 200 people that were living in Nash and Edgecombe County that were working at QVC. The remaining balance were coming from Southside Virginia. They were coming from as far east as Bertie County, Currituck County, Pitt County, Wilson County, and so it was a widespread widespread, I guess, geographic service area that we were serving. The road system is so much better. And so I think there is a real case to be made if you want to live in a rural area, to the extent that we have Wi-Fi, to the extent that we have broadband access. You can live anywhere and commute, and again, it's not like when I was a kid. I've grown up in Rocky Mount. I remember sitting in the back of that station wagon going to Raleigh, and it was basically a 2-hour to Crabtree Valley Mall when Raleigh was, 100,000 people, 150,000 people, something like that. And it was 2 hours. We went on a 2-lane road. I think we stopped at every stoplight along the way. From my house now to the Capitol, it's 45 minutes. 45 minutes, I don't care what time of day or night. And that's a big game changer too. And so I think what we've been doing, and I think what a lot of other folks are considering too, is how do you create transportation networks Like, for instance, we're trying to create a commuter bus system, and we're going to launch something, I think, very soon. Where we're connecting Rocky Mount with Raleigh with multiple trips a day, then tying into our Tar River transit system, which reaches out to multiple communities within our 2 counties. And we're going to try to expand that to an even larger group. But it is about creating that live, work, play, getting people to move here, taking advantage of the fact that places like Wake County really don't have a whole lot of water and sewer capability for expansion anymore. And that's a significant limiting factor. So yeah, it is about how you take advantage of that. And at the same time, how do you control growth and how do you create the environment that people want to be part of? And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I'm just echoing all of your sentiments, and you couldn't be more right. So, I think these are interesting perspectives that you have. And so, being the 4th fastest growing state, or at least the last time I checked in the union, is wonderful. It does create an increasing tax base. I mean, it really is an environment where it's very difficult to make mistakes. And
right.
You can't outgrow a problem, and that's why I like to be in growth businesses. You seem like a genius, and the only thing that's really happening is your revenue is growing faster than you can screw it up. Now,
right.
Eventually it plateaus out and it becomes a whole other ballgame of management, and that's where we'll find ourselves at some point, but hopefully not anytime soon. So, where do you see the other challenges for North Carolina business? I mean, you talked a little bit about some of these issues with fast growing, but I've seen a lot of other positive opportunities. So where are you seeing that in the discussions that you've been having with folks? Where do you think the highlights are going to be, where the opportunities exist, and what should we be considering to try to advance that both as a population and as a government?
I think that one thing I was mentioning about, like last year, you didn't have the major, huge announcements that we did previously, right? But
Right.
we did probably, in many ways, we probably had about the same number of announcements. And one of the things that we're looking at there's a lot more like smaller, either expansion of some smaller companies or mid-market companies that are coming in here that are actually investing in here, and they're investing in some different areas as well, which is good. I think what I'm looking at now, and I'll tell you this really quickly, is look to the Triad in North Carolina as your next boom town.
Okay.
Charlotte and Raleigh have really been, stealing the headlines, if you will. I would say Charlotte first, and then Raleigh came later with some more big headlines in terms of that. But this Toyota factory and all those things going along that Carolina Core Crescent area is something really special. So look for your Greensboro, your Winston-Salem, those pretty large cities, and at one time were larger cities in North
That's
Carolina. Right. I can see those folks really benefiting from these jobs that are coming into the areas as well. In addition to that, if you go to a place like Siler City, I think if you go into Siler City and some places in Chatham County down the line, in 5 or 10 years, you're not going to recognize them. It's already happening a little bit, but it's going to
say, I mean, even 10 years ago, the Chatham County doesn't look anything like it does now. I mean, it's different. Yeah. And it's just getting bigger and better.
And the interesting thing is this and this should interest you. So the old guard that was elected, city officials and county officials in those areas, they're going to have a whole new set of things they need to deal with, because you're going to have folks that are going to be moving into this area, and they're going to want good health care. They're going to get great schools. They're going to want all these different things, and they're going to be there. It's not going to be an aspect of recruiting them. They're going to be there and demand it, and pay with their tax dollars. So that'll be kind of an interesting, how things change from that standpoint. As well, I don't see that as a challenge. I see that as great for all areas of North Carolina. I don't see anything. I think now we have a little bit of a different state government than we did. Obviously it's similar, but we don't have a supermajority in the legislature that you can overturn a veto, which I think is going to be kind of an interesting thing to watch on down the line. But for the most part, it's going to be kind of similar as well, though, in terms of the makeup of state government as well. And I think that's helped us a little bit, to be quite honest with you. We've always kind of pushed the fact that we're we're looked at as a red state, but we've got a purplish hue to it, I guess, if you will.
I think we're a very purple state. I do.
Yeah.
I think that I just do. So look, you talked about great opportunities on really the I-85 crescent, which is where what 80% of the entire population of the state lives,
Right.
With the exception of a few pockets, Asheville, Wilmington, and Greenville. And then you look at way east, you look at way west, have historically and continue to be more economically distressed than the rest of the state. So what are those components of the state? How do you think that they need to be looking at opportunities that are presented with this population growth? How can they get back in the game? How can they become the new Siler City, if you will, in your analogy?
Well, people these days, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. There's a lot of folks in terms of economic development. In the past, it used to be when a company was coming in a location or considering a location. What would they look at? Is the power cheap? Let me get the land, tax breaks, those kind of things. Just your basic stuff, right?
Right.
That has changed. That philosophy has changed so much. It's still very important to it. But like I said, you got to lump in that quality of life these days way more than it used to be. How's your health care there? You know what I mean? At the schools, of course, as well. Access to entertainment and lifestyle and things like that. I think those are incredibly important. And if you don't mind me saying, I think you guys are doing a really good job in terms of addressing those needs as well. The redevelopment that's been happening in Rocky Mountain and Nash County and Edgecombe County is really taken shape to the point where we wrote about this thing that's really interesting, where I think Tarboro now is being really promoted as a great place to, hey, this is a wonderful little town, that's idyllic and stuff like that. That's used as a recruitment method, which is really cool. So I think you guys are like really on the right track from that standpoint. I'll also say your neighbors in Wilson County are doing a really good job of doing that same kind of thing in terms of their downtown redevelopment. You know what I mean? And that's why my wife's family's from Wilson. I couldn't believe it the first time I saw a damn brewery in downtown. It blew my mind.
Right. Well, and we talk about Wilson in particular, like it's an overnight success, but it's been a 15-year overnight success. They've been working, laying the foundation and doing a great job with that, and they're now starting to see some real returns from that, and kudos to them. And I also believe that we're there as well. So, is there a big story out there that no one's talking about? What are you seeing in your crystal ball, or what's sort of the undercurrents that really you think is going to shape the biggest next story, or one that needs to be talked about now?
I'll tell you the ongoing story that we have talked about for years and years, that people that keeps business owners up at night, regardless of a good or bad economy, is workforce. The biggest issue that comes up in any roundtable that I do, regardless of what industry it is finding qualified workers and keeping them. And that is something that is just, and that's a nationwide thing. So from manufacturers to hospitality, to all that, it's getting good qualified people and keeping them there. That's a story that's that's a decades old story. We're great in the state in terms of bringing all these, we're talking about bringing all these newcomers here because they want to live here. So, we've got the goods, but the key is once they get there, how can we train them to do what we want to do? Because we have a variety of different jobs that are needed. But at the same time, how can we keep them there? It's one thing and here's the problem with having so many different companies that come to North Carolina. Well, now you got competition, right? So someone can hire, a programmer from one company right to the other. SAS Industries probably had a great deal going on right there, and great place to work and stuff like that. But when Apple moves next door, where do you think they're going to go, right?
It's their ballgame. And why do you think Apple moved next door?
Right. But to address that, what do? It's essentially, I always feel, and I know you guys do with your community colleges there, I feel that we have the best community college system in the state. So in terms of, in terms of kind of our manufacturing jobs, in terms of, biomanufacturing, what you're seeing in the Crescent as well, those type of things. I think we're doing a really good job of addressing the needs of what those big companies are here. With our higher education, that's going to be that's a challenge as well, because we have that triumvirate there in the triangle that's really doing a good job. And I think what we're seeing now, what I'm noticing is in places like App State, UNCC, UNCW, ECU, I think you're seeing that they're starting to realize that we need to step up our game, because we're recruiting. We're also a piece of recruitment for our community as well, which is key. So in a place like ECU, you want to have those students staying in Greenville and staying in Eastern North Carolina, and becoming model citizens and good business people in those areas and stuff like that. So I think that is going to be the continuing story in 2025.
Well, I like that. So, look, I cannot end a conversation with you without asking, what's the song you have stuck in your head right now? And what are you listening to? And we got to go down that road. I mean, that's one of my favorite components to your newsletter, if you will, is the Friday special. Who's playing? I get all excited about it, and it is just all over the board, which I love. So, what's stuck in your head today?
Well, two things. So, I travel a lot and go see a lot of concerts. And so I was at Christmas, I went down to Charleston and saw my favorite jam band, which is called Goose.
Sure.
And they do something every year for 3 days. It's called Goosemas, and they have some sort of weird theme and all that kind of good stuff. It's a big sing-along and all this kind of cool stuff. So, unfortunately, I'm gotten goosed out. After I got done with the last day of the concert, I was like, you know what? I've heard enough. I need to take a chill. But I'm still listening so much to Billy Strings, who is just an enigma, a phenomena in terms of his guitar playing, but the songwriting and the energy at the concerts is amazing. That's my next show. I'm heading to Asheville. I'm gonna go support Asheville, Western North Carolina. Spend some time up there. Spend some money on some good food, good times, and give them some cash. But there's a song right now on his latest album, which it's a great album. It's called My Alice, and it's a very if you're familiar with kind of Shady Grove, bluegrass kind of sound, it's very similar to that, but it's a very dark, dark song. It's about murder and all the great things that bluegrass.
A lot of great songs, Murder by Numbers. I mean, there are a lot of great songs out there about that.
Exactly. It's in a minor key, but it is. It's a great song, and I have been listening to it constantly, and I'm driving my wife crazy because I crank it all the time. And I think the other day she was like, "You're not planning to harm me in any way, are you? Because this song is really dark."
I was going to say, I do not want to see you on the ID channel, okay?
You won't believe it.
I'm not worried about it, but anyway. Well, look, man, I appreciate you taking the time, and it's always a joy to get a chance to talk to you. And I just want to say God bless. Really enjoy your stuff, and again, thank you for taking the time today.